Mzansi leader Songezo Zibi has conducted an oversight visit in Mthatha in the Eastern Cape, where we might all recall in quite graphic detail, devastating floods left more than 100 people dead and thousands more had been rendered homeless. That disaster destroyed homes, roads and schools right across the province, and families are still displaced months later. We will bring in Zibi now, who is also saying that one of the things that are needed is urgent action to restore the infrastructure and give relief to the communities there. Songezo, good morning. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it. I think let's just start there with the picture. We shared with our viewers just horrific images of homes submerged, taxis that were carrying school kids submerged by water, bodies of children being found in the aftermath and the days after. What did you see when you went there?
Good morning, Iman, and thanks very much for having me. Look, the signs of the devastation are still there, and the scars of the trauma that people experienced this past winter are still very fresh in most people's minds. Some families have had to move away from where they lived, which was very close or in the actual floodplains themselves. So it is very unsafe to stay there. There are community members that still live on the floodplain. Still and need to be moved away from there. But also government's plans take time. So we also saw signs that some people are still waiting for relief. For instance, in North Crest, where I grew up, there are about 74 families that are still in a hall, still unable to access permanent or semi-permanent accommodation. So they stay together in the hall. The charities, local NGOs and the municipality seem to be doing their best, but things are in short supply. So for instance, yesterday they needed gas canisters for cooking. But we also saw signs of resilience among the community members. People are trying to make best of the situation, but it's really, really hard.
Well, I want to go back to the families that you saw still staying in a community hall. I mean, as our coverage continued, you know, there were various fiascos around people who were booked into accommodation, who then had to leave, or places that weren't really prepared for the influx of those who suddenly found themselves without homes and belongings. Did you get the sense, Songezo, that even though things are taking long to change or to create a permanent solution to problems, that there is some kind of order, that families are being tracked? There are databases of numbers. We know where people are and what their situations are.
I think there are two big obstacles with this disaster response. The first is the quality of the data. I met several people who just simply were not on the data at all, or the collection was done in such a way that it was impossible for them to get on it at the time the data was being collected. Let me give an example. In the Mthatha taxi rank, there are lots of people that lost their businesses, you know, the informal traders and so on. When the municipality or the government came to take down people's names, they came on a Sunday. Now, people are not there on a Sunday, generally speaking, traders. You won't find them there. So you still have a lot of people whose names were not taken on board. That's one example. The other example is people that backyard dwellers. So, you know, where you think you've got one household, in reality, you've got 5 or 6, depending on the size of the backyard dwelling. And there is some disagreement about how much aid they should get, they're entitled to, and so on. Then there were people who were renting space in other ways were not catered for. So the quality of the data is a massive problem. The second, of course, is communication. And these are all issues I am going to raise during the course of the next 24 hours with both the mayor and the MEC for COGTA in the Eastern Cape.
Okay, yes, and you should, and you will, as you say, given that there are anomalies and gaps in the information. But you know what's distressing, Songezo, is that we always, in situations like this, seem to be on a learning curve. We're always, you know, going to find out, or, you know, we're going to use this as an example or an event where we can try to do better. We've had many disaster situations. I mean, KwaZulu-Natal has had several weather-related disasters where, again, the response was caught wanting, and we would, you know, imagine that we'd learn from those events and just apply to another geographical region that's experiencing something similar. What's your appraisal now? And that disaster was 4 months ago here in the Eastern Cape. What's your appraisal of the lessons that had been learned, that had been brought to bear in making sure that the responses were more efficient and a little more sophisticated than we've seen in other regions in the country?
Look, as a country, we refuse to learn, and I raised this in Parliament when we had a debate on disaster relief earlier in the year, even before the Mthatha disaster. Just 3 quick examples. The first is that there's lots of homes that are built on a floodplain. We only the next heavy rainfall away from another disaster. There is still no effort to educate people, to work with traditional leaders, to scope all of those people, understand how many people are affected and how many people need to move away from those floodplains, what kind of help do they need, how much it's going to cost the government, and so on. We don't do that. That's the first thing. The second thing is the state of disaster preparation is also not up to scratch. For instance, in the whole of our Tambo District Municipality, the municipal authorities themselves, and we were discussing this with the executive mayor of the district municipality, there are no lifesavers, none, zero. They've got fire response, but that's about it. So when people are drowning, there's literally nobody to go and save people because the ability, there are no divers, there are no lifesavers and so on. I don't want to go on, but the state of disaster preparation in the country, frankly, Iman, is pathetic. The last one is the budgeting. We continue to budget as if we are not in a climate disaster scenario as a country. The Treasury has published guidelines and a paper on this, but my view is that we are likely moving too slow. The contingency reserve needs to be much bigger than it is because we're going to have another disaster again.
As you say, I mean, weather patterns are changing, and in certain seasons there are expectations that bad things will happen insofar as flash flooding and things like that. I know that you said you're meeting the mayor and the COGTA MEC, and we'll get to that in a moment about what you're going to actually ask them to do. But in terms of a central national command disaster response mechanism that galvanizes everyone who is responsible or in real time is able to do inventory on what's available to respond. As you say, not all the pieces are in place to save lives very quickly. What does that look like? And, what do you understand of where we are in having that sort of national synchronized, easy to deploy response?
It's not just a synchronization that is not in place, Iman. It is also the hyper-localization of disaster relief, because one of the things that costs lives is the amount of time it takes for gift of the givers to mobilize support and eventually deliver it to the area. As we saw during this disaster, bridges were swept away, and it was just impossible to access certain areas without the use of a helicopter, for instance. So there is a lot of planning and resourcing that needs to go into resourcing disaster response, first of all, and secondly, locating in localities some disaster relief capacity. So that is why I'm saying we are still nowhere in terms of disaster relief, and unfortunately, people are going to continue to die while we act surprised each and every time.
Yeah, the thing is, though, when we think of Gift to the Givers, they're volunteers, right? They're an aid organization. So I'm talking about something that comes, from the state, from government, a response network that is, immediately galvanized. They know what to do. They know what their roles are, and they deploy it very, very, very quickly. And they happen under obviously any NGO, any aid organization that's helping should be an incredible support to what already exists. What we're seeing instead is they take the lead role often, Songezo, in situations of need.
No, my comments were directed specifically at government, not NGOs. I'm simply highlighting the fact that it is Gift of the Givers and other NPOs that get there first because the government has not built the capacity. It has not done the planning and the preparation, the synchronization, so that to just press a button, if there is a flood, people can be warned ahead of time, they can move away because rainfall can be predicted to a large degree and so on. So I'm making the same point, Iman, to say we rely on Gift of the Givers and other local NGOs which do incredible work. I met some great people yesterday who continue to look after the community, because the government continues to fall short either because of communication, planning, or resourcing.
All right, so what will you be talking to the mayor and the COGTA MEC about tomorrow, Songezo? Again, it is just, families that are swept under their numbers typically at the end of the day. And as you say, some are already this morning, as we're speaking, just staying in a hall. They still don't even have the basics like gas to be able to cook and to make provision. So the situation is really miserable for them. How does it change through some of the meetings you're planning on having?
So firstly, the important thing is to highlight the issues that people have shared with me. There are some emergency cases that need attention within the next couple of days because it is untenable. For instance, at the hall in Northcrest, there are children that are disabled, that have got serious disabilities, that share the hall with lots of other people. And it's important that the family gets moved into a facility where they can properly take care of the children. That's one example. The second example is even some of the people that have been moved to temporary housing in an area called Ngambedlana across the N2. They've got electrical stoves, but there is no electricity into the houses and so on. So I'm going to highlight those issues. The second thing I'm going to do is that we have a cooperative governance system. And as a member of parliament and chairperson of a finance-related portfolio committee in parliament, it's also to offer my assistance to them in terms of things that we can do with national government to move things along a lot quicker, discussions with various ministries and so on. That is the job of an MP. So it's not just demanding the accountability and action. It's also offering to assist them where they need assistance.
Songezo Zibi, the leader of Rise Mzansi, thanks for talking to us this morning. Appreciate that, and we hope that succor and relief come for those affected communities sooner rather than later, languishing still after 4 months.